Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about staying at home when you have older kids. A listener sent us a great question about this topic. Join us as we share our own experiences with deciding to stay home with older kids and some of the benefits we've seen over the years. Let's get started. Listeners, today we're addressing a listener question about staying home after your kids are in school and, as she writes more specifically, middle school. And Julie and Mindy, I think many women can relate to this question. It seems socially acceptable to stay home while your kids are little or even in elementary school, but as they get older, you feel more and more alone in that decision. Did you relate to her when you read her question?
I very much did, because you maybe have a chance to breathe and people are starting to ask you questions. I get more questions as my kids got older and I didn't have any preschoolers at home about, well, what do you do? And and so it's hard if you're not comfortable in your answer. You're already have, the struggle internally that you're questioning. What am I doing?
Right.
Why am I here? Because I do have some, essentially, I want to do air quotes when I say free time, but I do have a minute, and you kind of question it again. Right.
Julie, did you experience anything like her question? And we're going to read her specific question in a moment, but do you relate to that sometimes it seems okay to stay home when your kids are little, but then as they get older, you find yourself having maybe to defend that a little bit more?
Well, I can relate to it maybe in a different way because I homeschooled in middle school, so I wasn't feeling that. I still felt really a part of things, like I needed to be there. But as your kids get older and start to graduate, you do start getting the questions. So are you going back to work? That's just kind of what everybody thinks is the next step.
All right, well, let's listen to what our listener emailed us. She said, I'm a stay-at-home mom of 2 middle school-aged boys, 8th and 7th grade. I was super involved with volunteering in the elementary years, and that filled a lot of my time. I loved being a part of their school day when I could. But now in middle school, there are almost no ways to be involved as a parent, or at least not in school during the day. So I've struggled a bit with knowing what my role is now. I have not felt called by the Lord to go back to work, and my husband agrees that running the household and managing the kids' schedules is plenty, but I still feel a little lost in what my purpose is. I've got to think that might be a common concern for moms in this stage. And I think she's right, as we've all three said, that it is something that you wrestle with if you do decide to stay home when your kids are a little bit older. And, staying at home is a dream for many. So, I know some people might be listening and they're working mom and they're like, I don't know if this really applies to me, but I still think that some of the things we're going to talk about today do apply, especially why I decided to stay home. So stick around and stick with us. When you are having your first baby, this is probably one of the first things you consider. Will I stay at home or will I adjust my work schedule? And you run the pros and cons and you gather your people to see what resources you have available to make the very best decision. And so a lot of times people do decide to stay home, but fast forward 13 years and your baby is not so little. And if you're still at home or still considering coming home, because maybe you've been working, but maybe you're starting to feel, I actually did talk to a mom a couple of years ago that she worked while her kids were young, but as they got into the middle and high school, she really felt like she needed to be home. So that could be a situation that our listeners are in also. So you get your kids a little bit older and they can finally feed themselves and cook for themselves and they're potty trained and you think, oh, well, they don't need me as much, and your kids are starting to get more quiet. It's like they hardly talk to you. Sometimes they're in their room a ton or any conversation you get out of them is like pulling teeth. And so you think, well, maybe they don't really need me that much. And you start having feelings of loneliness and you wonder how much value your presence really means in their lives. Have you guys felt that as your kids have gotten older? I mean, I'm sure you've questioned many times. I've questioned probably yearly. Is it still the right decision to be home?
Yeah, I think there's so much encouragement to be offered here because I think there's a lot more to consider than maybe just the jobs you do. Like you're not a robot doing those jobs. Like there's interactions, like there's the chance, there's the opportunity to pull them out of their room and join something, or the conversations that we've talked about this a lot, the conversations you have in the car. And those are all opportunities to teach and to listen and to learn and to pull them out. And it doesn't always work and you don't always get the feedback you want, but at least you're there. And, I thought about this kind of as in a hypothetical way. Like if I was given a choice to work when my kids were babies or older, like I had to pick one, I would choose babies. Because, if my mom today just came up and said, hey, I worked until you were 5, I wouldn't remember that.
Right.
But I loved, it just felt good to go home to a mom in a house for me as a teenager. And I just think that that's when they need guidance and direction and emotional support that other people can't give, as much, or I wouldn't trust that to other people as much as I would myself at that point. So I think there's a lot more to consider than maybe just the physical jobs you do.
Right. Because it's easy. I know I'm in this right now, and I feel like I'm just an Uber driver all the time. And I choose to take the boys to and from school because I know that like 10 minutes in the car is the best conversations I'm going to get from them. Because when we're at home together, we're not interacting in the same way. But somehow sitting side by side and driving, I get more conversation. And so it's so small, in a day. I could maybe get 30 minutes of intentional conversation. And that's only because I'm driving them. I know that that's going to change once Jacob starts driving in July. And the other thing is I feel like it's all these unknown scenarios, like being available to text them throughout the day. Now that kids have smartphones at schools, I feel like I'm constantly texting one of my children in school. And we have conversations that way. And so I think there's no way when I truly think about like, do I actually have a block of time to go to work? And I have been trying to study for a certification for months and I can't seem to block even an hour. I feel like I'm constantly communicating. With COVID the past couple of years, those teenagers have been home a lot more, or if you have a snow day. And I feel like it's just these unexpected things. You can't really like write down exactly the times you're going to get with your kid. It's like, oh, if they're sick, oh, that's a date with mom day is how I see it now. But I'm available. And so it's almost like you have to plan for the unexpected when it's teenagers, but those unexpected things happen so consistently that I cannot seem to think that I could really have meaningful work outside of the home right now.
Right. Well, Mindy, you had asked me to kind of talk about why I decided to stop working at all after all my kids were finally in school.
Yes.
So my degree's in speech pathology, and I worked as a speech therapist before my kids were born. And then when my oldest two were about 3 and 1, I went back to work 2 to 3 days a week. And I worked part-time from that point on until my youngest kids, I have 5, so my twins, until my twins were done with kindergarten, I worked part-time. Working part-time is something that society tells you is kind of like the ideal. Oh, if you could just find a part-time job, that's the perfect setup. I don't know how many times you hear that. It is pretty doable when school is in session. If your kids are going to school every single day without fail, and you're working within those school hours only, part-time work is doable. It's still not easy. Like my 2 oldest got on the bus at 6:20 every day. So that meant I was up at 5:30, helping to make lunches, helping to get them out the door because they're exhausted at waking up at 5:30. They get on the bus at 6:20. I might run around, try to get myself ready. Then I have to get my 3 younger ones up and ready and fed and out the door. And then the second their bus leaves, I have to get in my van and drive to work. So you're starting your day very early. And then, yes, you might have only worked during those school hours, but you're racing home to get home by the time the bus drops them off. And then you're kind of mentally done, but they're like a chatterbox. They want to tell you everything. And you have to start dinner, or you might have to start running my older kids around to different activities. Then you have dinner, then you have homework. And if you're working part-time, I think the tendency is to say, okay, well, I'll just catch up on everything tomorrow because I'm not going in. But you can't defer taking care of yourself forever. So then you tend to have a little slower day the next because you're just trying to even mentally catch up. I don't know. It always seemed like you were either trying to play catch up or putting things off. And then, like I said, part-time's great if school's in session, but what do you do all summer with 5 kids? That's a big pain in the butt. And then, when you're working in a hospital, then they also wanted me to work 1 Saturday a month. Well, everybody works 1 Saturday a month. Which Saturday do you want? I don't want any of the Saturdays. I don't want any Saturdays. Like, I'm finally home. My husband's finally home. And you think, well, it's just 1 Saturday, but it inevitably falls on that kid's special game day or the day they were supposed to go to a birthday party or the day, it's never a good Saturday when you have a busy family life for mom to just be gone all day. So it just got to the point where I just felt like I didn't even like the part-time work. Like it was just too, interrupting life too often. And so I was in a Bible study when my girls were in kindergarten. Mindy asked me to share this story, and I was trying to think, Mindy, you might remember the story better than I do because the woman, my girls were in kindergarten, they're seniors now, so I know this woman listens. And so forgive me for getting this story wrong. But the way that I remember it is her husband was the church's music minister, and they lived, I'll say 45 minutes from the church in a house that I think they had built that they really liked in a community that they really liked. But with 3 little kids, she didn't feel like she could be the mom and wife and music minister's wife that she needed to be living that far away. And also, I think at the time, she may have been homeschooling or her kids might have been in public school, but she was going to flip-flop it. Whichever way it was, she was going to do the opposite to free up time. And it wasn't something that she really wanted to do. She didn't want to flip it, and she didn't necessarily want to move, but she felt like she needed to. And it just, I don't know. You know how God places things in your life when you need them? Because there's probably, 25 other people that heard that story and they wouldn't even remember it. But it really stuck with me with what I was trying to decide at the time. And she just kind of made it clear that she felt like she had to make these sacrifices to meet a higher goal and a higher priority in her life. And so they were going to make some family change. And so I got to thinking, my husband was just finishing up 4 years of law school, so he would work in the day and go to school at night. And he was going to be thinking about starting a job where he would travel quite a bit. And I thought, man, he's going to be gone even more. And I feel like I already can't really meet my highest goal, which is to be a good mom and a good steward of my family. And I feel like if I could get rid of this work, I could do a better job. And so I did decide to stop working part-time. It is difficult, though, to do that because when you've gone to school for something, there is this societal pressure to not waste, I put in quotes. Don't waste your degree. If you stay home with your kids, then you wasted your education. And so that was a real struggle for me to decide that I guess I'll be viewed as wasting my education. And also, when you are making your own money, you felt like, oh, well, I have my own money, or if I needed to support myself, I could. There's some self-esteem things in there when you're working as a woman and you could support your family if you needed to, and you have job options. Like there's a lot. And when you quit working, maybe the first couple years you could get right back into it. The longer the time goes by, you're like getting more and more separated from that. Yes, I still have a license, and if I absolutely had to, I could work, but you've lost your edge. You're not up on exactly what is going on in the field because things change a lot in the medical field over a decade.
Oh, yes.
My girls were in kindergarten at that time. Every year I thought, well, I'll evaluate, should I go back to work? And there's never been a year where I've said, yes, I should go back to work. I possibly thought of going back to work when both my girls could drive, but then COVID. It was right in the middle of COVID, and we were going into a school year where we were remote. We didn't know what was going to happen. The previous spring, they'd gotten out in March and never gone back until August. Like, I was so glad that I wasn't working at that time.
Right.
I don't know if that's what you meant, Mindy. Like, was that what you were thinking of?
That was exactly what I was thinking of. I just remember that conversation vividly because my kids were a little younger and I was already starting to anticipate those questions in my own life. And so I don't know how that conversation happened. I just remember it. And I remember where I was standing even.
Really?
Yes, I do. I was walking around with my little toddler, Nathan, outside in my driveway in Nashville. And we were on the phone, actually. And I remember you telling me that. And I just thought that was so interesting. I didn't fully understand why at that time, but it intrigued me enough and made an impression because I was already starting to feel it and wondering, like, what's my future? What am I going to do?
I'll second the myth of part-time work being easy because I worked for 10 years part-time. And I even had my mom for childcare. So I wasn't even paying for childcare. I didn't have to leave my house to go get it. You know, she came to me.
Wow.
And I just remember before my shift, I worked 3 to 11. The entire day before was prepping, you know, cooking the meal because I would be gone during dinner. So prepping that meal, packing my own dinner, packing their lunch for whatever they were going to the next day because I wouldn't get home till midnight, you know. And then the whole next day I was recovering. So every one day I worked was really like 3 days of added stress. And I feel like such a wimp for all you moms that are working full time. But I think when you're part-time, you're not in either world really well. You're straddling both, and that makes it harder because you're not fully committed to either one.
Well, I do have a unique situation that we were in when we lived in Knoxville. All the kids were in school. I was offered a part-time job at our church, and we had been in Knoxville long enough that our family was settled. Abby was in high school, Grant was in middle school, and the 2 boys were in elementary school. And so I was intrigued enough by this part-time job at the church that I really thought, I think this is going to be a good fit. And so the interesting part was when we sat the 4 kids down, Bryce and I, and we had a family discussion. And this is what I want to spotlight. When we brought up, what do you guys think of mom working just part-time? She'll still be able to take you to school in the morning and pick you up in the afternoons and all of that. What do you guys think about that? Abby and Grant, 100% were against it. They were worried. They were like, we can text you anytime right now. And Abby being in high school, and this is an unfortunate thing that our kids deal with, but she said, if there's another bomb threat at the high school, I want you to be able to come pick me up. And because that had been happening, which you just hate to hear, hate that our kids, they have to deal with things like that in high school. And so she said, you're available. Like, I really like having access to you. Like, these were the words she was using and vocalizing at the time was access, availability, pick me up, text me, just these things. And when she was sick at home, she still wanted me there, like in high school. And so I did actually go to work. I took the job, and it turned out to be a wonderful thing for our family, for them to see me in that role. And then we all ended up going to the same place. They ended up going to school there where I worked, and it was a really sweet season. However, when we moved away, I knew that I could not work full time. We didn't have the same support structure. We didn't have, we weren't all going to the same place. And I will give testimony of right now, currently in my life, Jacob and Nathan are, in school, middle school and high school. And I won't even teach one fitness class that prevents me from taking them to school in the morning because, and you would think, like, surely I could pick up a fitness class at 8:00. Well, no, because it would cause me to stress, to run out the door earlier, to drop them off earlier. And I'm just not willing. I'm not willing to give up that even one day a week with them in the mornings. And then I was asked by another friend, would you be willing to lead a Bible study? And I said, absolutely. And she said, it'd have to be on the night or the weekend. And I said, nope. I said, I would love to lead a Bible study when the boys are at school. But I cannot when they're home, when everybody's home. And so even now, mm-hmm. I know that about myself, that this is such a short time. I won't always be in the season, mm-hmm. and I want to be there for those short, very short conversations.
I think that's really wise. And to say something to the listener that asked this question, I just think we underestimate our influence in those years when they start to pull away, because we don't get the feedback we want. But there's actually research that says parents are still the biggest influence in their kids' lives, even over peers. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't always feel that way.
Right.
And I think too that there's more to running a home than just taking care of kids. Like, unfortunately, a mom's work is the kind of work that only gets noticed when it's not done. Mm-hmm. You know, you take her out and then it all shows what she does. But it's hard to, explain what you do all day,
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's what keeps the home running. Like, my husband had a very demanding career, and he couldn't help in a lot of that area. So I knew one of us had to be reliably, consistently there. And it was going to be me, Right. It probably wasn't going to be able to be him.
Right.
And I'd like to say, on top of all this that we've talked about, it is a huge privilege to get to do this. I don't take that for granted. I know a lot of women don't have this choice. So we have to remember that.
Right. Well, speaking to the listener, when she thinks about her purpose, we kind of wanted to highlight some of the benefits of staying home, and we have been doing that, but staying home with your middle or high school. But when I really think, for me, it all boils down to availability, because I felt like, there's always been this big debate over quantity over quality, but I really feel like in the teen years, it just needs to be quantity. You could set aside the best day. You could think, man, we are going to connect. And we've all experienced, your kid will decide that is the day to roll their eyes and, get in a fight. And, that will be the day they decide that. It's like, you have to just be around. And then your times when you connect are going to pop up out of nowhere. Like, you couldn't have really even planned them. Sometimes Steve will call me when he's on the road and he'll be like, "Oh, what did you do tonight?" And I'll be like, "Oh, well, just out of the blue, so-and-so was home and I didn't know they were going to be home. And we did this together, or we had this really great conversation about this." And if I wasn't there, we wouldn't have had that. And would the world have kept on turning? Yes. But maybe that child would have gone somewhere else to talk about that, or not talked about it, or I don't know, or we would have just missed out on that memory. Like, there's something to be said for just availability.
Right.
Yeah. And with teenagers, unfortunately, it's on their times. They're in charge of when they're going to let it all out or whatever, and you can't force it. And so you just hope you're there when they're ready, and it's sometimes it's really late at night after they've gotten off of work or coming from a date or whatever. But, I don't know. Those were some of the best conversations that we had.
Right. So we had even a situation in our home last night where we actually had more time at home together. And one of my sons decided to disobey something really easy that I'd asked him to do. And then when he had a consequence, he decided to lose his mind over it. And so at that point, he did not get to partake in the presence of his family because he had to go to his room. And he also did not get to have the really good dinner that I had made. And so he thought that was just, inhumane. And so then I also let him know that he would not be able to go to the gym in the morning because he would be walking down to catch the bus. In the 20
I used to
degree
use
weather.
Riding the bus as a punishment too.
Marie, oh my gosh.
For your teenager.
Yes. And I just I was like, I do everything for this ungrateful child. This is what's going on in my mind. I do everything for this ungrateful child. And as soon as you take away some of these privileges, these blessings. Like they have no idea sometimes what they have. And so that was his consequence. And so then this morning I was thinking, I'm so glad I don't have to rush off to do anything, because the first thing out of his mouth was, I'm sorry, Mom.
You would have missed it. You would have missed the apology.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mom. Like he had tried to come down and sneak a spoonful of peanut butter and he took the spoon away from him. I mean, like he couldn't have anything. And I said, I'm sorry, you lost the privilege, to partake in our family. You can't treat people that way. Mm-hmm. And so this morning, when the first words are, I'm sorry, Mom, then, we actually role played. I was able to have time to role play with him. Well, when you're angry, that's not how you respond. How could you respond when you're angry? I want you to get your journal out and I want you to write down why you're so angry. And then I want you to write down what you are thankful for. And he did it. Mm-hmm. And I just have to say, like, I was so glad this morning to take that time to parent. Like there's these social interactions, human interactions. And I just think like he's a teenager. I only have so much time left. So there's things that come up, these big character issues that I think, well, I don't want him to, treat his future wife this way. I don't want him to treat a boss this way. Like all these things are going through my mind of these training to be an adult. They're so close to being an adult. And they are clueless sometimes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have an example that happened just recently. So my son's in college, so I'm really not parenting much at all. Mm-hmm. But I know these kinds of things happened earlier too. I just can't remember them all because it was a while back. But I was in the kitchen sharing something I had learned from a book I'm reading. And it was kind of deep. And I just kind of went on. And I got zero emotion response from him. He was there, he was in my presence hearing, but there was nothing said. Mm-hmm. Well, a week later, he finds himself in this situation with a senior project that he's working on leading it. And I said something like, oh, that sounds really difficult. And he goes, but remember what you said last week, Mom, about possibilities? Like if you don't think about the possibilities, then you don't think about the solution. I just about fell in the floor. It was like he was listening and he applied what I said.
Oh my gosh.
That's so encouraging, Julie.
It really was. I thought, oh my goodness, thank you, Lord, for showing me that, because I literally thought it just went in one ear and out the other.
Right. Why did I even talk about that?
Yeah. He was probably thinking, how could I get out of this kitchen any faster?
I know. Like, here she goes again.
Well, okay. So this morning, I do have to tell you this because Bryce was standing behind the son that was in trouble. Mm. And as soon as you get your journal out and write down why you're so angry, like, where is that coming from? You're afraid of, you've got some fear inside somewhere. Like, figure out, where is that coming from? What are you worried about? And then I said, and then I want you to make a list of all the blessings and what you're so grateful for. Bryce is literally behind the child, snickering, like quietly. But he was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So he could not believe I was asking him to do this. He loved the whole role playing thing. But I'm like, look, I feel like he needs to do this. Well, I'm just telling on myself. The child doesn't listen to the podcast. He did the activity that I asked. And there were some very deep things that he saw about himself when I went to read his journal after he went to school. So,
oh, you better hope he doesn't listen.
He will not be listening to my podcast, but he left it out. I mean, but I loved that I had time to even go back and read the journal. So I hate to say that, but I mean, he got something from doing that. And now I know, I know that he's seeing the things that I'm concerned about.
Right, right. Well, let's look at what this woman is asking about, how she kind of feels. I think she feels, one, like she needs purpose, and two, kind of like she needs a good enough purpose that it's almost an excuse to stay home in the eyes of society. So, if your friend came to you and said, I'm kind of at a loss, what do you think my purpose is? Is there some kind of summary that you might give to her? I mean, we've talked about being available and all that, but how do you summarize that?
All right. Well, the three of us have all joked that it's nice that we have an answer we have a podcast. And the three of us know that we don't spend that many hours of the week on the podcast, but we've all joked that like when we go to an event or, something like that, and people are like, oh, do you work outside the home? We're like, oh, I have a podcast. Like, it's just nice to have something. Because you just need an answer,
Right. Yeah. Like, what do you say to that? What do you do?
Yeah. And okay, this was something I had lunch with friends, and they said sometimes they're offended by the question, do you work? And so they said to them that they really liked the wording of, do you work outside the home? And to them, that actually made a big difference. And so that, it changes the feeling, I guess, of that question.
Yeah. It's not even like so many people are asking this of other women all the time. Probably like, how many events are we all going to where someone comes up to us and even asks this? But we live in fear of, the question. Because society, there is a lot of shame. I was watching a show the other night where the woman accepted a marriage proposal and she said, but I'm going to be just like you. We can hire a wife. And I thought, oh, well, I mean, that is society's attitude sometimes. I'll just hire a wife. And it really feels demeaning almost, to think, oh, well, that is the role that I'm, but I don't know that you can hire love and care. You can hire physical chores, but you can't hire the feeling and the reason people do them behind it. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think it's just safe to say moms are going to feel guilty no matter what, because the working mom feels like she's not spending enough time with her children, and the stay-at-home mom feels like she's not contributing to society or to the family income. And so I think you just have to make the decision that's right for your family and not really care about what your neighbors or your or total strangers think, like I don't ever have anybody ask me that question, but the only time that I would feel a little awkward was if we would go to a work Christmas party, because half of John's partners are women doctors. And it always just like, do I measure up? Like, is what I'm doing as important as what they're doing? And often he would say a lot of his women partners were really kind of torn. They still wanted to be at home too. So I don't think either side just has it all figured out or is guilt-free.
I think like the word mom equals guilt in my mind. Like as soon as you're guilty about something, I have more and more free with this as I've just become more and more comfortable and content with what my purpose is at home, knowing that, not everybody's going to maybe understand that. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay that not everybody's going to understand. Just like, I'm sorry, but not everybody's going to like you. I mean, it's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
And so I do think that is a very internal contentment. And it took me years and years. So that's not something that just came. And I do have to remind myself, because especially as you have teenagers, they're not always going to be grateful for the things you're doing. Just like my previous story. I mean, they're not going to be like, wow, mom, thank you so much for sacrificing, to stay home. I know you could have been doing this, this, and this, but instead you're driving me to school and picking up my ungrateful butt and, telling me to clean my room and telling me to, to do these things that I don't want to do. Like, they're not going to say thank you necessarily.
And I guess I would tell her too, to kind of start to embrace it a little bit. I think make the decision and then kind of be okay with it. Even if you just say, okay, well, I'll reassess next school year, but then start to use some of those hours for yourself. If you want to take a class that's just a hobby type thing that you're interested. I mean, I took painting classes and got into this whole big long thing where I would oil paint while the kids were sleeping, or exercise classes. Or I've recently been thinking about looking up some other classes. I won't even say on the podcast what they are, but I'm just interested in it. I just think that there's probably things that you put on the back burner while your kids were little, and now while they're at school, and you can take care of them. And it doesn't have to be so intensive that on school break you're not available, or summer, or even after school, but just something that gives you something for you. I know, Julie and Mindy, you guys have pursued a lot of different things over the years that just interested you. And like you said, Julie, it's a privilege to stay home. And so don't waste that. Like if you're interested in something, do it. Don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say at this part is that I think it's really important to maintain in some small way through the years, and it gets easier the older your kids get, to maintain the parts of you that make you you. And as moms that stay at home, you could say, well, it was a sacrifice. Now, for some people, it was the sacrifice of income, a degree, status, influence in the world or whatever. And for others, you might just feel like you lost a part of you. Because moms defer. I know I deferred. I would never say where I wanted to eat out after church on Sunday. It was like wherever you guys want to eat. I just wanted them to be quiet and happy about it,
Right.
And I didn't care what my favorite was. And then when they were gone, I didn't even know what my favorites were anymore. Somebody asked me that question one time. It was like, I don't know. I've always just deferred to what made everybody else happy. So you do lose a little bit of who you are. And so I think it's important to maintain that, like developing hobbies, volunteering, what you want to study. Like I still love learning. So I'm constantly reading now and or teaching something like I taught in our youth group or taught Bible study or ESL. And because if you've just totally abandoned everything that you love, then you're really going to struggle when your kids are gone. And you might even resent them. Like I sacrificed and now I'm in this place. I'm kind of floundering. And like I was a pharmacist and I may never go back to that, but I did keep my license up and I paid my fees. Like for 23 years, I did that and I still could go back. But that just kind of kept a door open for me.
Right.
So you just have to keep alive those parts of you that you want to still be there and when your kids are gone, like, so you can pick back up.
I think every person out there has things about them that would allow them to have some sort of meaningful contribution to society. I call it meaningful work that could be paid or unpaid. I was also thinking about how the job landscape, the work landscape has completely changed over the past 10 years. There are so many creatives out there and so many different ways to put your creative talent, no matter what that is, to work. Now, whether that's in a way that you are serving other people, volunteering for other people in certain ways, or actually producing an income. So I don't think that this is just myopic. I think it's multifaceted, this particular part of being able to produce meaningful work. So each of the three of us have things that we pursue. Even in our Happy School book, I love that we're going to be talking about that in the future. Just the your skills, interests, and also what can meaningfully contribute to society. And so I think that every person will develop that. And I know for me, it didn't really develop till the kids were a little older. And I gave myself a little space. I gave myself a little time, mental break. So it took some time, but
I know we often say that nobody needs us anymore, but that's not true. It's different people need you now. It's they're not just right in your face where it's obvious. You have to kind of go and find who they are. And I don't know. I remember a story. I was at Mayo Clinic with my son for a medical problem, and I met a lot of other moms whose kids were in the same situation. And I met this mom who we were talking about this very same thing. She had homeschooled 6 or 7 kids and was finished with that. And she immediately went back and got her master's so she could teach high school chemistry. And she said, oh, it was the worst mistake ever. She said, I hated it. Like there was grading papers and meetings and stress and hours of teaching. And her life was starting to change again. Like she was starting to have grandchildren and her husband was retiring and they had freedom to do other things. And she said, she goes, if you don't have to, Julie, don't do it. Like, or don't rush into it. Like you feel like there's just such a vacuum when your kids move out, but I would say be patient. Like it takes time to figure out what you want to fill your days.
Right.
Yeah, I can remember a mom on my block. I had, preschoolers, but her 4th child was going to kindergarten. And I remember we were standing on the corner and we were all talking and someone said, well, what are you going to do? They're all in school. And she's like, I've been having kids at home for 10 years. She goes, I'm just taking this year for myself. She goes, and I loved how unapologetic she was about it. Now that I've had kids go to kindergarten, I understand that it's not just, every single day is free and you never do another thing. But in my mind at that time, I thought, wow, from 8 to 3, she must literally do nothing. But
eat bonbons.
But what I really loved about her attitude was it was such an example to me, like, hey, I've been doing something for a really long time and I'm going to take a year for me and I'm going to figure it out. And she wasn't concerned. She wasn't apologizing for saying, you know what, this is going to be some time that I'm going to figure out.
Right. And can we talk about the benefit to our children to see us producing meaningful work or like developing ourselves as individuals? Like, I think it's so beneficial and wise for us to not lose ourselves, even, as the kids get older, that we have our own interest still, even if you're at home.
Right.
And so I just think that they need to know that like we're real people. It took my older two leaving the house and I'm like, wow, they really see me, in a way that they never saw me at home.
Yeah. When talking about guilt, I always was really confident in my role at home. Like I knew that's where I wanted to be and I needed to be. I tended to feel more guilt when I was at work. Even though the kids were little, like I felt like I'm missing out. I want to be there. So like I said, either way you can feel guilt.
You're going to feel guilt no matter what.
It's true.
But I never felt guilty staying at home. I never was bored. I always have something to keep me busy.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is one thing that I wish I could tell people too. Like, I don't know why you're concerned with what people are doing at home, because there has never been a single day I've been bored. There have been days where I've felt like, probably people wouldn't think this was important, but I'm not personally bored. So,
or I say I'm having a hectic week, and then if I told you what made it hectic, you might laugh. But it was really a crazy week.
I guess I would say to the listener, you're probably never going to come up with a good answer to this question, but I would just take it year by year, see where your kids are. You can even do what Mindy did and like try part-time at some point if you want to. See how you like it.
Yeah, it all depends on your situation.
Right.
So there's not any one way that is right out there. And so
no,
it's just your family is your family.
Yeah, I've known families where the moms worked the whole time and they've done great. That house runs like a well-oiled machine and they have it figured out and their kids did great. So, it can work both ways. I just know it. I would have probably been stressed more had I been at work too. Do y'all remember that movie, One Fine Day?
Yes, with Michelle Pfeiffer and George Clooney.
That movie just stressed me out.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe I need to watch it.
Huh?
Maybe I need to watch it. Is it good?
Oh, I think you would really like it. Yeah,
it's really
Michelle
cute.
Pfeiffer. Yeah, it's cute, but they're both divorced parents and their kids miss the school bus and they have big careers and their careers are on the line and they ended up having to juggle their whole day in childcare. Sick kids and all this on this one day. And that stressed me so much.
Yes, I remember that too, Julie. I totally agree with you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, this is a really good discussion. I know, Julie, Mindy, that we have talked just privately about this so many times over the years. I probably bring it up the most. Like, I think if we were going to be on the guilt scale, I would be the most guilty. And you guys are probably like, why does she bring this up every year or so? But I was so glad to get this question to know that I'm not the only one still wrestling with this all these years later.
Yes, you're not alone. And this conversation has come up probably 3 times just in the last week from different people that I've talked to. And so I know that this is something that's on every mom's mind, whether you're working or staying at home. You're constantly like, am I doing the right thing? Is this what's right for our family? And navigating that. So very timely from our listener.
Yeah. And for those on the other end, because I'm talking more to moms who are already through all of this, and it's easy to doubt, did I do the right thing? Should I have stayed home when you kind of feel like you've lost your purpose? And so just like I said, just be patient. It takes time to figure out that next phase.
Yeah. All right. Well, listeners, we'd love to hear from you. I know that some of you guys may have some great wisdom on this topic, or maybe you're going through it, or maybe you've recently experienced it, but we would love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast or email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. But before we go, we want to do I'm a Fan. And Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
Well, one of my favorite mom hacks right now is I found that we have a neighborhood Walmart store. Do you guys have one of those? It's
yes, neighborhood Walmart. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a little similar to Aldi, though just a little bit bigger. So you get more of the items that kind of you're used to. And if you need medicine or you need, body wash, whatever. So I have found that I really love if I have to go into Walmart, it's the neighborhood store. And it's become one of my favorite go-to places. I can't handle going into the super center. It stresses me out. But the neighborhood store to me is doable because there are just some things that I still need to get from Walmart because practically I know that they're cheaper there. I know I'm going to more find what I need there, especially if I need paper products or anything like that. And so I am a fan of the neighborhood store, though I do not use the app to do grocery pickup. This is if I have to go to the store. This is the least stressful grocery store, Walmart, that I can find. And I have enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Yeah. I used to love ours. Like when it first opened, I loved it. Over the years, I don't think they've really kept it up as well. But my sister has one right down the street from her house, and it's an awesome one. It even has gas station pumps there. It's newer, and she does the pickup there, and she said they're always speedy and on it, and like they've really got it going on in that location. Nice. So it could be hit or miss for where it is, but I'm glad to know that yours is doing a great job.
I'm glad our little town has one.
Yeah. I kind of forget about that place. That's where I used to do my pickup. It was always at the neighborhood store.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
Well, I'm a fan of a recipe, and I'm a fan of the lady who develops the recipes. So it's kind of a two-part thing. The recipe is creamy sun-dried tomato chicken pasta. I made it last night, and it tastes like restaurant quality food.
Wow.
And I've made 3 of her recipes. I found her on Instagram. It's Anna's Table, and it's Anna_S_table.
Okay.
But her blog is servingdumplings.com.
Oh, it's cute.
And it's just the cutest thing. She said her first job was a dishwasher. And she just loved learning how the kitchen worked. And she moved up and started cooking and developing recipes and opened her own little place. And I was just going to read her bio. It says, now years later, and after a few other projects, I figured out that there's only one mission for me: to convince you that cooking is nothing but pure joy and delicious food is really not that hard to make. And so I've made 3 of her recipes, and oh my gosh, they are so good.
Wow.
I need to maybe look her up because I'm just counting the days till I don't have to cook anymore. That's how much I hate cooking right now.
Yes.
So I need some inspiration.
Well, I'm kind of starting to enjoy it more now.
Okay,
so there was a phase where I wasn't, and now it's picking back up because she has beautiful pictures. She does her own photography of this food, and it just looks amazing. And it's kind of one pot meals, really, really good. And I wouldn't say that they're super easy recipes, but they're not hard. And in her menu section, she has everything from vegetarian, meat, breakfast, baked goods. And then she has one section that's 30-minute meals. So you can't find the easier stuff there.
Wow.
I love 30 minutes and I love one pot.
Yes. Both of those fit our life.
Well, I'll share this recipe. I'll send the link, and then you can find all her other stuff once you get to that recipe.
Okay. And
thanks, Julie.
Her blog is called Cooking Dumplings?
No, servingdumplings.com.
Okay, servingdumplings.com. Neat.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Maria and I need all the help we can get in this area.
I know.
I appreciate that.
All right. Well, I'm a fan of a movie I saw this weekend. You guys both read Redeeming Love.
Yes.
So I was looking up, when did that book actually came out? I think I read it maybe around 1998 or 99. It actually came out in 1991. I was so surprised. It's been around a long time. What would that be, like 31 years now? And they're finally making a movie of it. And you guys, it's awesome. I mean, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I was just enthralled. Like, I love all historical dramas, and this one also has romance. It's just a really interesting story. Longtime listeners will remember that I shared that I had read the book a long time ago. Then I listened to the audiobook last fall because I knew they were going to be coming out with a movie in January. And I'm so glad I did, because I really refreshed my mind on the story, because it's quite a long book. And then the movie was just like the cherry on top to, again, see it like played out by actors and actresses. So if you're thought about seeing the movie Redeeming Love, I think you would love it. If you're saying, what is that even about? So a little synopsis is Angel, that's the girl's name, was sold into prostitution as a child, and she survived through hatred and self-loathing in 1850s California. When she meets Michael Hosea, she discovers there is no brokenness that love can't heal. And this book was written by Francine Rivers, and she was a secular romance author. Then she became a Christian, and this was her first attempt at Christian fiction. So a lot of times when I read Christian fiction, it's very cheesy to me. Like, I just can't. But she really wrote a good book in this. And if you talk to, a lot of Christian women in the church, they'll say that even if they've never read anything else, they've read this book. Is that your experience, that most people have read this?
Yeah. It is mine, and you're the one that told me about it.
Oh, actually. Am I? Okay.
Yes. And it's funny because just over the years, my taste leans towards the cheesier. Like this, it is an in-depth book, and there are some uncomfortable sections of it. And I was like, wow, like this is, she really gets in there, and there's an emotional response for sure.
Yeah. So when I went into the theater, I mean, actually it's doing really well, I think, because we were going to go to the 7:00 show that was sold out. Then they opened up a 6:00 show. And it's so funny when you go into the theater. I mean, there were probably 2 men in the whole place, and it was pretty full. It's definitely a book and movie for women.
Right. The only 2 suckers that were dragged there.
And one of my friends that went with me, she goes, I'm so glad you set this up. She goes, because I was going to drag my husband tomorrow afternoon, and he was so glad to get out of it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a good movie, I would definitely recommend Redeeming Love. It opened on Friday, so you've got plenty of time to go and see it even after this podcast airs. Awesome. I think you and Abby would really like it, Mindy.
Okay. Well, that's good. I appreciate that. It's nice to have a good recommendation to go to the movies these days.
Right. So anyways, well, you guys, thanks for talking about the ongoing stay-at-home saga that we all feel. Listeners, we hope that you've enjoyed this and gotten something out of our musings.
This is part of us finding purpose with our days.
Yes. All right, Julie and Mindy, we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds great. Bye, y'all.
Bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.